What's the creepiest or most unexplainable thing you've ever seen that you haven't shared anywhere? Serious. My grandfather passed away several years ago after many years of dialysis. As he aged, we were told this treatment wouldn't last forever and become less effective, and they would had to stop it eventually. He was 83 when he passed, always fit and healthy, and the dialysis kept him going a good few years. He was unwell and taken into hospital. His dialysis was stopped, and we were told it would probably be around 48 to 72 until he passed. So all the family made our way to the hospital and stayed in the room with him as much as we can. They made him comfortable and was plying him with drugs to make sure he wasn't in pain. As he nears the end, he was in and out of a lucid state, most of the time in a slumber, almost living memories, mumbling and muttering. If he woke up, he would stare transfixed at a point on the ceiling, talking to God only knew who, as clear as day, and then he would drift off again. This happened all night. Moments before he passed, he sat up staring at this point on the ceiling, talking clearer than he had for the time we were there. Holding my grandmother's hand, he turns and looks her dead in the eyes and says that they are asking him if he wants to take a message over to anyone. Was there anything she wanted to say to anyone? When my grandmother said there wasn't, he lay back down, closed his eyes and passed peacefully. The whole room was silent. Every single hair on my body on end. I'm not religious, but felt I should go straight to church and start praying or something. My mother, who has been a nurse all her life, many years caring for elderly, told me that when a lot of people die, they focus on a point on the ceiling and talk to whatever is there. Her telling me that didn't help at all. Bizarre. My husband and I were walking in the downtown area of Seaside, Oregon. It was late December, so it was pretty sparse and many shops were closed as it was a Sunday morning as well. I stepped into a Celtic shop, and it was filled with people, all of whom became silent when I entered. As soon as I crossed the threshold, I felt heavy and blurry. The lady behind the counter said something to me and tried to hand me a pendant. Immediately, I saw darkness and red. Everything felt black. I felt like something was pressing on my chest. I had never felt such darkness before. I somehow ran out the door, and as soon as I was on the sidewalk, I was completely fine, as if nothing had happened. My husband wanted to go in because he loves places like that, and it was then I realized that I had no idea why he didn't go in with me in the first place. We were newly married and had been walking with his arm around me, so it was very odd. I just said, "No, we're not going in there," and dragged him away. I have been to Seaside many times since then, and the shop is no longer there, and I cannot find the place where I remember it to be. A long time ago in primary/elementary school, me and my friend came to the school compound on a Sunday to explore. We came in the wee hours in the morning, and coupled that it was a Sunday, there was nobody in. We were walking along a corridor on the first floor, when suddenly we heard this thunderous noise above us. You know the sound, where you drag a chair or a table across a floor? It was exactly that, but it sounded like there's multiple classrooms full of tables and chairs just moving around. It was loud, very loud, and it was extremely sudden. There's no reason why anybody would be in school, moving dozens of tables and chairs on their own on a Sunday 6 AM. We stood rooted, stared at each other for a second, and bolted. After we got out of school, he asked me whether I heard a lady screaming in the corridor. I said no. He didn't hear the dragging sounds either. When I was about 8 or so, my family went up to a campsite near a lake. We went with several other families, and they brought their kids too. One thing me and this one kid would do is search the shallow areas for crawdads. As I was searching, I began to venture a ways out until the water was up to my waist. The water wasn't too clear, but it also wasn't muddy, and I could see the pale area of the shallows and the darker area where the water dropped off, but I didn't know that at the time. I ended up stepping into the darker, deeper water and began to fall in. Before I could, a pale slender arm grabbed my leg and pushed me back to the shallows. All I saw was the arm as it sunk back into the deeper water before I skittered back to the shore. I remember it as clear as day, but nothing has ever turned up from that lake. No bodies, no drownings, nothing. My parents still think I made it up. I was in middle school, and my sister was in high school, and she was out with her friends. I went downstairs to get a snack and my parents were in the living room. I started crying and saying I was worried about my sister. She didn't have a cell phone yet, so there wasn't much we could do. Turned out she has been in an accident. She was fine, but it was scary. A few months later I was at school and I started crying. I called my mother and told her to call my grandmother. Grandmother didn't answer, so they called the neighbor. And the neighbor checked, and she had fallen in the tub and broke her foot. She had been sitting there overnight. I've trusted my gut ever since. I used to live in a house with 2 roommates. Let's call them Anna and Erica. I lived on the 2nd floor and Anna and Erica lived downstairs. Every night I would hear this thud coming from downstairs. I would investigate and it always came from Anna's room. I thought it was her doing burpees or working out at night, which seems dumb looking back. I never talked to Erica about it because I thought it was in my head, and since I was on the 2nd floor it never really bothered me. Fast forward 2 years and we all move into a new house with another roommate. Anna, Erica, and I live on the same floor upstairs. I start hearing the thud louder now. I go up to Anna's door and it sounds like she's hitting herself against a wall and whispering and crying or laughing. I also noticed when she left the room she had her sheets all scattered on the floor. I ask my other roommate Erica about it and she says she hears it too. Anna starts staying at her parents' house more often, but every time she comes home we hear the same thud noise. We started asking Anna about it, and she makes up excuses, like I was moving furniture or my porch door was swinging up. After we started questioning her more, she only came to our house maybe 1 a month to pick up some clothes. It was so strange. I never think well get an explanation. I was in bed at night, woken up by the sound of steps on my roof tiling. I think I was about 13 at the time. I see a shadow walk past my skylight, unsure of what it was. I look outside my side window and see a man dressed in all black looking out from the construction scaffolding. After a while he looks into my window and I try to hide. My brother also saw him. We never found out what happened to him, but the police were informed. My brother committed suicide in 2010. He was airlifted 100 miles from his house to the town by us because it's a large town with great hospitals. His wife, the only person that lived with him, of course, drive her car to the hospital, leaving their house completely closed up and locked. His cell phone was left in his home office by his wife. The next morning I got a call from his cell phone. I answered but nobody was on the other end. I said hi a couple times with no response. I finally said everything is okay, and the line immediately disconnected. Never got a call from that number again. When my daughter was very young, 3 to 4, we were on a family vacation in a state park lodge. Our room had exposed wood ceiling beams to match the decor. Important later. It was supposed to be nap time for my daughter, but she was quietly playing by herself and just chatting away, and the wife and I were eating on the other bed. Out of the blue my daughter turns to me and asks for a piece of rope. I asked why she needed the rope and she nonchalantly replies, "It is for my friend, the purple girl on the ceiling." My wife asks what friend, and my daughter responds, "I've been talking with the little purple girl hanging from that wood up there." She asked me for another piece of rope. Needless to say that nap time was over, and we quickly exited the room. A number of years ago, I was using an online chat site and got talking to a woman who claimed to live around 50 miles from me. We chatted quite happily for a couple of days. Then on the 3rd day, a Saturday night, she was online and we were chatting, but she seemed different somehow. Something just didn't seem right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. She explained that she was drinking, and I assumed that this was the reason behind the melancholy. We continued chatting, and she put on a cam, so I could see her there drinking as we chatted. Over a couple hours of chatting her mood appeared to grow darker, and she appeared distressed, but was hesitant to elaborate further. She left and returned around 30 minutes later, and appeared drunker and more distressed. This time she had a stack of tablets on the table in front of her. She claimed that she couldn't go on, and started to take tablet after tablet. I had no idea what this medication was. She was continuing to take more and more tablets and her speech was getting more and more slurred. I was suddenly in a terrible position. Was I seeing someone take their own life on a live stream and totally unable to do anything? All I had was a name and a town, both of which could be false. I made the excuse of needing the toilet and left the room, and took this opportunity to call my local police and explained the situation. The police took what details I knew, and I was told to go back and try and keep her talking and try and get further details from her. They sent a plainclothed officer to my house, and whilst I was chatting to her, he pulled up the chat logs and history on his laptop. By this time her speech was becoming more and more incoherent, and the cam was knocked so it was impossible to see her. Soon the connection was lost. Was this real? Was it fake? I had no idea of knowing. The police officer was during this time on the phone with the station giving them what information he had been able to obtain. He then left, leaving me to contemplate. The next evening I got a call from the local police station, who wanted to thank me. The police had managed to trace her through her IP address and had been able to attend. It apparently was a genuine suicide attempt, and she had been taken to hospital and was subsequently undergoing treatment. I was 10y/0 riding my bicycle at dusk along the road I lived on, which was parallel to a set of railroad tracks. I moved off the road as a car sped by and a beer bottle came sailing at me from the front passenger seat. I could see two young women turned around laughing at me through the back window. I flipped them off and kept riding. About 30 seconds later, I heard the train slam into them. When I was 20, I visited a town in Italy that has a number of medieval towers that you can climb. My girlfriend didn't want to climb any, so I went up one on my own and was the only person at the time doing so. It was a sunny day when I entered the tower. There was a flight of stairs that wound around the edge of the tower and no windows. Climbing the tower took at the very most 5 minutes. At the top of the stairs there was a ladder and a trapdoor that opened up onto the roof of the tower. When I opened it, I found the weather had changed dramatically and was overcast and threatening. I forget if there was thunder or not, but I was genuinely concerned about lightning being at the top of a tall tower in that weather. I cautiously climbed out onto the roof just to have a quick look before going straight down. The roof was surrounded with a sort of metal cage of bars that were clearly intended to prevent anyone falling/jumping off the tower. I heard some thunder and saw electricity arc between some of the bars. Not a blinding lightning strike, just arcing. I decided that the tower was imminently going to be struck and descended as quickly as I could. At the bottom I was surprised to find the weather was again sunny with a clear sky. My girlfriend could tell I was shaken and was amazed when I told her I thought that maybe there had been lightning. The weather hadn't changed whilst I'd been up the tower. I've started to tell the story a couple of times, but it's just too weird to expect anyone to believe. I have literally no explanation. I'm very much a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. I'm not religious, and I've had no other weird experiences like this. In short, I'm not your stereotypical spooky things happen to me kind of person. And yet, edit, did a bit of googling, and I'm 90% sure it was the Torgrosser in San Gimignano. It doesn't have a cage around the top, but there is a metal cage around the bells, and I guess that's what I remember. When I was 5, me and my identical twin sister both caught scarlet fever. We are from America, but my dad's project had temporarily relocated us to India, and we were not used to the water and food there. We both fell into a coma towards the end of the fever. One day I woke up to my mom and aunt screaming and crying and holding my sister because she was unresponsive and not breathing. They were doing chest compressions, CPR, etc. But nothing was working. I was desperately trying to get their attention because I was young and didn't understand what was going on. I went back in my room to go back to sleep, but in the corner of the room where my sister's bed was, I saw her laying there, breathing fine. I went back out to the living room and realized I was looking at myself in my mom's arms as she tried to revive me. Eventually, I saw my eyes flicker open, and then everything went dark. I woke up a few weeks later in the hospital next to my sister and mom, who ended up catching it. Because of us, my mom told me I had almost died and they were trying to wake me up, but I was unresponsive, so the ambulance took all three of us into the ICU. To this day, I'm still unsure how I witnessed my almost death. My ex-wife worked in New York City, but we lived in court, so she would commute in. She started having constant nightmares and terrors, and would wake up sweating and literally screaming. The nightmare: a plane would run into the World Trade Center and a lot of people would die. These started about 3 months before 9/11. We have never talked about it. My dad died from unexpected heart attack, and he was on the hospital for 6 days before he died. The 6th day, before they call us to tell us that he is gone, I see him in my dreams. I see him say goodbye to me and close the door of our house. Forever. That happened 6 years before, and I don't care if it's paranormal or not. It makes me sad both ways. When I was about 11 or 12, I went with my friend and my younger brother to play football in a park that was in a pretty remote place, so there were never many people. Basically 3 or 4 people came dressed in like Victorian style clothes, set up a box underneath a tree with big branches, tied a rope around it. One of them stood there with this noose around his neck, and then his friend kicked the box, so he was hanging. They took turns doing this, and we left. Was super weird thinking back to it, and I have to check with my brother whenever I think about it to make sure it actually happened. Edit. For people asking how did they not die, they were taking turns etc. From what I remember, the box mustn't have been particularly high relative to the length of the rope, so there wasn't much of a drop if any. I don't remember how long they were swinging for, but I suppose it must have been between 15 seconds to a minute. Then the friends would put the box back for the one hanging to stand on, so they could get down, and someone else would take their place. I was young and digital cameras were a new thing. I was obsessed with them, and my mom would buy me a camera. We'd try it and see if we liked it, and if it was shooty we'd take it back. We purchased a cheap one. Indoor pictures had a red and yellow hue. It had long exposure, so a lot of the times there were streaks and weird stuff. I took a picture of my room one day and plugged it up to the computer to view the picture. There was a full-blown man wearing sweatpants and a sweatshirt with a hat. There were also light streaks in the picture, but he clearly looked different from the imperfections, like there was a man actually there in mid-walking motion. I called my mom right before commenting this to ask if she remembers that. She said she didn't really. I don't believe her, because the camera immediately disappeared after this event and she never got me another. When I think about it now, I'm in my late 20s, it still makes tears come to my eyes, because the house I grew up in was so scary and weird. I've never felt like that in any other home. Something was off. When I was a kid, I was playing in our kitchen when I saw a huge dark figure walk past the kitchen and down the hallway leading to the bedrooms. I walked to our back patio and saw the rest of my family watching TV. The patio is on the opposite side of the house from the hallway. I walked to the hallway and started looking for who it could have been, but never found anyone. Still have no idea who or what it could have been, but it's always creeped me out thinking about it. Several years ago, my friends and I were road tripping cross country, and we stopped at a campsite in southern Oregon. Something about this unassuming place made us all uneasy. It felt like everyone was staring at us as we drove in and set up our tents. We'd gotten that treatment in places where we'd stuck out, but here it seemed less like gawking and more like suspicion, malice. The sun set, our gear was set up, and we got in the car to smoke some legal weed before bed. We were talking and passing a pipe around, and my friend in the backseat had the door cracked with his knee against it. With no warning, something slammed into the car hard enough that backseat friend was pushed away from the door and the whole car rocked on its suspension. We immediately started the engine, turned on the brights and drove around our area looking. Nothing. We fell asleep in the car arguing over if anyone was willing to get our gear before we went to a motel. I used to live in the middle of nowhere. The town had less than 200 people in it. I used to work through the night in one of the metro areas, and it was about a 40-minute drive with about 15 of it on a county road. I used to think I would see shoot in the fields coyotes, deer, etc. all the time. Never thought twice. Well, one morning I was on my way home about 3 AM, and we had a little bridge to cross right before we got to our road. As I'm closing in on crossing the bridge, I can see something pearl white just hanging out in the middle of the road. Thought it was probably a swan, and it would move. As I got closer, I realized that swans are not that big. I was in a ref 150, and it was at eye level with me. When its wings opened up, it literally covered both lanes of traffic. I swerved to miss it, but hit some of the wing. I slammed on my brakes and turned around. Whatever it was 100% gone without a trace. Never saw it again. If it was a bird, that's the freaking biggest bird I have ever SEO, and I did not alive by anything considered to be a large body of water. Edit. The only thing I can describe it as a humongous crane, but the only area where cranes live close to that old house was about 5 hours away. Edit. Grammar. I was working in a retail store in a pretty sketchy area. There was this lady who was obviously a heavy drug user or ex-drug user. She must have been in her 50s or 60s. She was notorious on my block for being a crazy, but she'd visit me all the time and told me she thought I was cute. It was really bizarre cause she looked like a crackhead, but she'd act like a teenage girl around me. I tried to be nice to her cause she was known for being volatile. Anyway, on Christmas Eve she packed an entire Christmas dinner which she told me was all home cooked Guyanese food and a cologne set. As she was leaving she just squats down on the floor and throws her hand up and starts cackling. Yes, cackling which faded to a giggle. Never saw her again. Edit. Yes, I ate it, and I enjoyed it. Confirmed with some Guyanese redditors. Main dish was definitely pepper pot. Second edit. So a lot of you seem really surprised I ate the food. Some describing it as insanity. Some as a mark of true bravery. Let me be very clear, the point of the post wasn't even about me eating the food. I'd basically take free food from a stranger any given day of the week. From the moment she handed me the food, I knew I was going to eat it. Neither the prior knowledge of her being a druggie nor any action she would take after handing me the food was going to change this. Not technically seen, but heard. When I was about 15 I willingly stayed home alone to look after my pets while my family went on a cruise. One night I heard the distinct sound of the old kitchen window open, freaked out and hid in the cupboard. Was so afraid that I called the police. They showed up soon after. One stayed with me and the other went around outside to check the window. Window was closed, no footprints, no marks on the window or anything. To this day I'm puzzled by this, and I'm still confident that I really did hear that window op. It's been almost 10 years, and I still don't have anything that's somewhat close to an explanation. What happened then? Me bestie and me were sleeping over at her grandma's house and enjoying the newly renovated attic as it was supposed to become her little teenager apartment. All new furniture with a huge comfy couch and nice clean boards screwed to the wall, all in white pink. Sleepover went just like you would imagine it, with two 15-year-old girls painting nails, watching DVDs, and talking about the hottest gossip at school. It was already like 3 AM when we decided to go get some sleep and left the room to sleep in the bed next door. Only a few minutes later we heard a little scratching sound followed by a loud bang, clearly coming from the room we just left. One of the boards that were screwed to the wall was lying on the floor, almost 4 meters away from where it was supposed to be. Not like screw broke and it fell. Nope. Solid 4 meters away from that wall. Almost 2 centimeters deep hole in the ground where the board was laying. The holes in the wall looked like something grabbed that board and pulled it straight out, ripping the wood and concrete it was drilled to. Still getting goosebumps remembering it.